Another month, another gun ban. If you just want a quick TLDR, you can check the link in the description for the timestamps to the video so you can jump around to whatever you care for. And I'll also have the links in the description to this article and the list of firearms that was banned. What happened? Well, the Liberals added nearly 200 more firearms to the prohibited weapon list, or they added 179 to be specific. Now, what are those 179? Well, we have the answer for that. This is the list. You can go take a look at it down below. And essentially, it is a lot of semi-auto shotguns, specifically magazine-fed bullpup ones, and any semi-auto centerfire rifle with an FRT left. So what does that mean? Well, the M1 carbine is banned. All of the variants of the M1 carbine, a lot of World War I, World War II kind of things were banned, including the 22s. Some shotguns were banned, like the Canuck Spectre. There is a lot of things in here. The Rashid got the ban. Interestingly, they did not ban the Daria TM22, which I was led to believe could be banned, but it has not been banned. The FD12, which is a very prominent shotgun, magazine-fed shotgun. Lots of variations of the M1. Most of these seem to be variations of the M1. The Hakim even got a ban. The AG42 got a ban. And the SVTs got a ban as well. Now, again, I'm not going to go through all of these individually. If you want to see, you can go check the link in the description, see if your gun was banned. What was not included in this ban? What is still legal? Well, there's a few very interesting things to talk about on that front. If we take a look at the CCFR's cheat sheet of the recap of the press conference, we can see that the SKS was not banned. And as we look at the list, the SKS was not there. This is despite Rachel, the deputy, she's not the deputy public safety minister, but she's the second in command in public safety and a notorious hoplophobic MP. She said the SKS was a weapon of war and it should be banned, and yet they have not banned it because it is used by too many native people for hunting. They want to ban it. They really want to ban it, but they can't do it without fucking over the native people, and so they just don't. Now, also along the same lines of thought, what was not banned was the Valmets. The Valmets are still legal in Canada, and if you don't know why those specifically are legal while the SVT and a bunch of others got prohibited and the AKs are prohibited in general, it's because the Canadian government gave a bunch of Valmets to native populations in Quebec, and if they ban them, they would look really bad, so they just don't ban them. They are extraordinarily expensive, though, so it's not like those are going to take over the market. And the other thing I want to highlight with regards to what was not banned regards this paragraph. The draft regulations tabled in December on the FRT will be strengthened so that the manufacturers and importers will have to wait for completion of a technical assessment and obtain a reference number before new firearms can enter the Canadian market. So that means that any firearm that does not have an FRT will not be allowed to be sold on the Canadian market. What guns does that affect? That affects the Crypto, because the Crusader Arms Crypto was actually not banned by name. The Crypto, after today, is still a legal firearm in Canada, and you can still buy it, you can still sell it. However, that might change very soon. Once this comes into law, the Crypto will no longer be allowed to be sold, so you can't sell it privately, and gun stores are not allowed to sell them. And once the FRT comes into force, whenever that might be, who knows how long that'll be, it will probably be prohibited. By the letter of the law, it shouldn't be prohibited, but we know that the RCMP does not always work by the letter of the law. So I'd expect that to be prohibited. Another gun that this also applies to is the Sterling R9. So if you have those guns, feel free to take them out and have a good time. Now I want to talk about the magazine ban / magazine regulation change. We don't know exactly what's happening with this, and it was also very obscure in the press conference because it was only mentioned in French. That's why I missed it originally, and I'm looking at the tweets and being like, oh, there is a magazine thing. Now, according to the magazine restrictions section on the CCFR's recap, they said magazine regulations are in the works in order to implement necessary measures to limit high-capacity magazines. These new regulations are supposed to be presented in the coming weeks. But what does that actually mean? Well, we don't really know. I'm going to give you a few options on what it could look like, and all of them are not good. I'm going to start with the least impactful of any potential changes they could make. The first is that they change the importation rules with regards to how magazines are pinned. Magazines are typically pinned, meaning there's a rivet that's put through, and that blocks the follower from moving down. It is considered a permanent modification to the magazine, and therefore that is what is used in the vast majority of magazines that are imported into Canada, whether they be rifle or pistol magazines, if it is needed. So that means other methods would have to be used, like welding metallic magazines, or maybe crimping magazines in such a way, or just magazines that from the factory can only hold 5 rounds. Think of the crypto magazines, where there's no possible way that they could be modified to have more rounds. If this was all that they did, this would be the least impactful one. It wouldn't affect any of our own magazines or anything like that. It would mean that new magazines coming in would probably be slowed down until they found a universal way to block the magazine in a compliant way. But in the long run, it's really not that much of a difference. Option 2 is that they say any magazine that used the riveting pinning process is now a prohibited device, and they either say that you can destroy them or that you can modify them in a way that they are not pinned and it is crimped or some other kind of way to prevent them from holding more than 5 rounds. If they did this, there would be tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of magazines across Canada that became prohibited devices, and I guarantee you every single Canadian gun owner owns at least one magazine that would be considered a prohibited device. It is impossible to not have that happen. It would be a gigantic clusterfuck, and it would guaranteed it would never be followed. People will just store them in a drawer and not take them to the range or hunting. But wait, it could get worse. If they wanted to, they could go all out and scorched earth more than they have scorched the earth already. In the past, the government has said that they want all magazines, meaning manual action, rimfire, everything, tube, and that includes tube magazines, not just box magazines, to be 5 rounds maximum. That is insane, because it would ban bare minimum tens of millions of magazines, likely past 100 million magazines. Not to mention, it would ban a fuck ton of tube-fed magazine rifles and shotguns until they were modified, if that's even an option. That would be the most insane thing the Canadian government will have ever done in this century, if they were to actually do it. In order for them to do that, they would have to make all of them prohibited devices, because that's how the Order in Council would have to be issued. I believe. I'm not a lawyer. I believe if they were to do this, they have to make them prohibited devices. They can't just say it's something else. And so if that's the case, then there's no grandfathering of these things, because that would require legislation. And even if they want to pass legislation, and let's say the election is in the fall, they literally would not have enough time. They cannot pass any legislation that is introduced right now, no matter what kind it is, unless it's the budget, before an election. It's literally not possible. So that's the magazines, and that is the rifle portion done. What else happened? Well, the domestic and gender-based violence stuff happened. Essentially, these were yellow flag laws that were put into effect from C-21. So this is nothing new. These laws were already on the books. They just came into force earlier this week, and so they mentioned them. The confiscation program, on the other hand, had some very strange updates. The city of Winnipeg, which this was expected, by the way, I made a community post about this not too long ago. The city of Winnipeg has signed an agreement with the federal government to confiscate people's guns. So this is nothing new. It's just a confirmation that the confiscation program is still moving forward. But there was some interesting news with regards to the business side of the confiscation program. Rachel has said that the Liberals received 7,500-ish guns from businesses for destruction. But, according to Runkle and Tracy Wilson, as you can see, the businesses have not been paid yet. Now, in the press conference, they said they received 80% of the guns that they expected to get from businesses. But is that 80% of all of the guns available, or is that 80% of what they expected to get, right? Very specifically on the expected, because if they only expected to get 10% of all of the guns, then they got 8% of all of the guns if it's 80%. So we don't know exactly how much they've got and how many businesses are not participating. We know that businesses like Spectre Ballistics are not participating in the program. One final note for what was said at the press conference is the amnesty. Now, it was said only in French, so there is no real elaboration, but the amnesty was extended until March 1st, 2026, well after the next election. However, we don't know exactly what this entails. Does this only apply to the guns that were prohibited in December and today, or does this apply to the guns from May of 2020? We don't know. And the confiscation program, according to the RCMP, is slated to begin in July. So again, that is well after, likely, the next election, meaning that the Liberals are once again planning to run this as a gun ban election. And actually, finally, one last thing with regards to the press conference, and that had to do with the firearm classification. In the press conference, Rachel said there is a need for a comprehensive review of the firearm classification regime, and that we now have one of the most complex systems of firearms classification in the world, which creates challenges for lawful gun owners who deserve certainty. Well, Miss Brendian, you're the one that created the complex system where things are arbitrarily banned by name for no good reason. This is on you, not on anyone else. You're the government that abused the OIC powers in order to ban things you don't like. So what did she mean when she said that there needs to be a comprehensive review of the firearm classification system? Well, in the press conference, she talked about setting up a committee to review potential changes. So just like everything the Liberals do, they'll stack the committees with people that agree with them, just like they did with the Nova Scotia shooting, and they'll end up with a classification regime that is just horrific. And what could that look like? Well, their definition of assault-style firearms is essentially anything that shoots rapidly that looks scary. Now, those are not mutually exclusive. Some of them can just look scary but not shoot rapidly and be banned, and some of them can shoot rapidly and not look scary and be banned. What it means is that the classifications of non-restricted and restricted and prohibited will likely be amended such that almost nothing exists in the restricted category except for the handguns that people still own, and the prohibited category will contain almost everything that is either both or singular of scary and shoots fast, which means 22s are probably going to be banned if they were to do this. I wouldn't be surprised if they went the Australia route and banned pump action shotguns. But here's the good news. She was pressed on this, and while she didn't exactly say it outright, it was heavily implied that this is not something that can be done via order in council. And it's pretty obvious that it can't be done via order in council because the concept of prohibited, non-restricted, restricted is one of the core components of the Firearms Act. So they would need to rewrite the Firearms Act entirely in order to accommodate these new changes. And like I said, they don't have time to do this, to put legislation forward, even if the election is in the fall. So this is something that they are going to be campaigning on. Now, finally, we can look to what the future holds. In the press conference, we saw Rachel bring up United States statistics on gun crime in a way to justify the Canadian gun bans, which I don't need to tell you how absolutely stupid that is, but it shows what they're going to be doing in the next election. This next election, because of Trump, is going to be all about our relationship to the Americans and a little bit about, cost of living and things like that. And because nationalism in Canada is left-wing, all of the hardcore anti-Americanism that exists, which has existed since the day Canada was created, will now be drawn right to the Liberals. And guns are viewed as an extremely American thing. If you spend any time on the internet, you know that America and guns are like hand in hand. It's really common for it to just equate guns with America. And so in the election, we're going to be seeing a lot of the conservatives want to undo all this gun ban stuff. They're just like the Americans. They want to be like America with all of the American guns. And that actually could be very effective. You might be asking yourself, well, isn't banning guns when we're under threat of an annexation from a foreign country a bad idea? And wouldn't that make people think twice? You would be right if it was any country other than America. The homophobia in Canada's left-wing and nationalist sectors is so deeply rooted that it's going to play well in the election. Now, for the election itself, will the Liberals win? Oh boy, it is looking very risky right now. Carney is not a good campaigner. We've seen that so far in the Liberal campaign. He's hiding all over the place. It's a lot like Kamala in that instance. He's stealing a lot of policies. He's constantly lying. He's caught in a lot of lies recently. But he's a Liberal, and so he has the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the American stuff. However, if he campaigns quite terribly, it's likely he falls back down. If you want a full in-depth conversation about the next election, you can check out the video I made on it a couple weeks ago. And that goes over the different scenarios of what could happen in an election. So that's it. Another gun ban down. They said this is probably the last one, but I highly doubt it. There's probably going to be more in the future if they were to stay in government. And we have more magazine stuff coming, apparently. But that is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I wish I didn't have to make this video, but I have to make this video. I don't think you enjoyed, but I hope you stick around. And thank you very much for watching.